Claire Bennett had never known silence to be so loud. The elevator ascended in hushed elegance, its walls a seamless blend of glass and brushed steel. Each chime marking a floor felt like a countdown she didn't fully understand. Floor 12, 13, 14. Her reflection stared back at her, polished, calm, and lying through her teeth. She held the leather portfolio tightly to her chest as if it could somehow ground her, tether her nerves. It was another Tuesday, another 8:45 a.m. arrival. But her gut knew otherwise. Something about today itched at her bones. Claire had been working at Halberton & Co. for 3 years. At 27, she had mastered the art of professional invisibility. Always present, never in the way. That morning, she wore her usual navy sheath dress, modest heels, a bun so neat it could survive a hurricane. She was efficiency personified. No one ever suspected her of anything other than quiet competence. But Claire had grown up in places where silence meant danger. Where pauses in conversation weren't gaps, but warnings. And for weeks now, Matthew Ryland had been pausing too often. The CEO of Halberton & Co. was a man who had turned calculated charm into an empire. Everyone adored him. Clients, journalists, baristas, janitors. Claire admired him too, not because of his status or wealth, but because, on the surface, he was different. He thanked interns. He wrote thank you cards. He once ordered every employee lunch when the elevators went down. But the thing about good men is, no one checks them twice. The elevator stopped at floor 41, and Claire stepped out into a hallway lined with thick carpet and silence. Her heels sank soundlessly into the floor, muffling her entrance into what the team upstairs called the cloud. Light streamed in from massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric shadows across a space so pristine it almost felt like a simulation. Claire passed desks too orderly to be productive, faces too composed to be honest. She gave nods, received distracted greetings in return. But when she reached the corner office, the door was already ajar. Matthew never left it ajar. She hesitated. 3 years of routine made this single detail jarring. She knocked anyway, out of habit. "Come in," his voice called, steady as always. He sat behind his glass desk, framed by the city skyline. His suit was tailored, tie knotted to perfection, watch subtle and elegant. He smiled. Not the wide, disarming one he used in public, but a quieter, familiar version, the one reserved for early mornings and late reports. "Morning, Claire." "Good morning, Mr. Ryland." He gestured to the desk. "Leave it there. I'll go over the notes before the call." Claire set the portfolio down and lingered a second longer than she meant to. Her eyes drifted, only slightly, to the edge of his desk. There was a folder, unlabeled, thick. Something about it felt wrong. She shouldn't have noticed, but she did. And then, she made her first mistake. "Is that the Vancouver project?" she asked, too casually. Matthew's hand moved instantly, covering the folder with a notepad. He smiled again, wider this time, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, just some old paperwork. Nothing urgent." She nodded, backing away. "Let me know if you need anything." He watched her a beat too long before returning to his laptop. Claire exited the office, but her heart didn't follow. Something was wrong. Later that day, she would tell herself that it all began with that file. But the truth was, it began the moment she walked into the elevator with the feeling she couldn't explain. The moment silence screamed at her, and she didn't cover her ears. That was the beginning of the unraveling. And Claire had no idea how much of herself she would lose, just to find out the truth. If you asked anyone at Halberton & Co. about Matthew Ryland, they'd answer without hesitation. "He's brilliant. He's generous. He's the reason I still have a job." There was almost a reverence to how people spoke his name, as if Matthew wasn't just a CEO, but a steward of decency in a world that had forgotten it. He'd started the company from scratch after leaving a lucrative position at a hedge fund. Stories floated around the office like gospel. How he refused to lay off staff during the pandemic. How he personally funded medical expenses for a colleague's sick child. How he still lived in the same midtown apartment he bought 10 years ago. Claire had heard them all. She'd even verified some of them herself, out of curiosity. They were mostly true. But today, as she moved through her usual rhythm, checking calendars, forwarding reports, coordinating calls, those stories rang differently. Not false, just incomplete. That folder haunted her. She had tried not to think about it. She wasn't a snoop, she never had been. But the way Matthew had reacted, too fast, too smooth, it had lodged a question in her mind that she couldn't dislodge. Why lie about something so simple? At noon, she joined the senior staff for a strategy session. Matthew led the meeting with ease, outlining quarterly projections, discussing partnerships, offering praise in all the right places. He was charming, commanding, effortlessly trustworthy. Everyone hung on his words. Even Claire found herself drawn into the rhythm of his voice, lulled by the familiar cadence. But every so often, she would catch him glancing at his phone. Too often. And once, just once, she saw his jaw tighten before he quickly composed himself. When the meeting ended, Matthew approached her near the glass doors. "Claire, do you have a moment?" "Of course." He led her to the side, voice low. "Can you do something for me? Discreetly." Her spine straightened. "Anything." "I need a contact in legal to pull an archived contract from 2 years ago. It was under Rytech Holdings." That was unusual. Halberton's legal matters never overlapped with Rytech, Matthew's defunct shell company, which had dissolved quietly a year ago. "Is this for internal use?" Claire asked carefully. Matthew gave her that practice smile again. "Just tying up some loose ends. Nothing to worry about." She nodded and made a note, but her fingers trembled slightly as she typed. When she returned to her desk, she looked up Rytech. Nothing notable, just a few transactions, all marked consulting. It had existed briefly, then vanished. Later that afternoon, she stopped by the legal department and asked for the file. They hesitated, said the contract was sealed, flagged under executive access only. When Claire returned and told Matthew, he seemed annoyed but brushed it off. "I'll get it myself," he said. "Thanks." But he didn't ask any more questions. He didn't follow up. Instead, he left early that day. Just before 4 p.m., which never happened. Claire stood by the office window long after he was gone, watching the sun dip behind glass towers. She should have let it go. She wanted to. But something had shifted. For 3 years she had admired Matthew Ryland, trusted him, defended him even, during the rare whispers of suspicion. But now she found herself staring at a man she couldn't fully see anymore. He was still brilliant, still generous, still the man everyone trusted. But trust is a currency, and once you start asking where it's being spent, you may not like the answer. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She dreamt of locked drawers and elevators that never stopped rising. Claire arrived early the next morning. Too early. The city hadn't yet shaken off its sleepiness, and the office lights flickered on as she walked through the motion sensors. It was the quiet that drew her in, not the absence of people, but the space it left for thoughts to echo. She didn't go straight to her desk. Instead, she stood outside Matthew's office, staring at the polished wood and frosted glass that had become as familiar to her as her own home. She knew his schedule. On Wednesdays, he had breakfast meetings across town and never arrived before 9:30. That gave her almost 2 hours. It wasn't a decision she made with glee. It was instinct. Not the reckless kind. Claire wasn't impulsive. She was deliberate, quiet, cautious. But this quiet had turned into unrest. into something gnawing. She slipped inside. The office smelled like citrus polish and faint cologne. Everything in its place, meticulously curated, just like him. Claire moved to the desk slowly, as if crossing sacred ground. She didn't want to snoop. She wanted to understand. The folder from the day before was gone. Of course it was. She tried the bottom drawer. Locked. She crouched, examining the desk from underneath. She'd never had a reason to do it before. But now she noticed something odd. The lock on the drawer wasn't standard. It was a biometric latch. Small, sleek, discreet. Matthew didn't keep cash or weapons in his office. There was no reason for a biometric lock, except to hide something. Claire sat back on her heels, heart thumping. She wasn't angry. She was unnerved. For years she had cataloged every little detail about this place. The brand of pens he preferred, the way he organized his client folders, the rotation of his watch bands. She knew this office like she knew herself. But this was new. Or maybe it had been there all along, and she had only just started to look. She stood up, turned away from the drawer, and saw her reflection in the office window. She looked calm. She wasn't. Before leaving, she did something she'd never done. She opened his desk calendar and flipped back. 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month. She scanned for anything that stood out. Meetings without names, events that weren't in her official log. And then she saw it. CP, 11 a.m., off-site. Just those 3 letters, no location, no contact, just CP. It appeared twice, once 4 weeks ago, again 2 weeks after that, and nothing since. She took out her phone and snapped a photo of the entry before slipping out of the office and returning to her desk. The rest of the morning passed in a fog. Matthew arrived at 9:32 sharp, greeted her warmly, and handed her a cappuccino without being asked, just like always. But Claire wasn't hearing the words he spoke. She was hearing what he wasn't saying. That afternoon, she searched through old files, authorized searches, nothing risky. But something nagged at her. CP. She ran it through her mind like a code. Client name, company project, an alias. At 5:48 p.m., after most of the staff had gone home, Claire's phone buzzed. A blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. A voice. Female. Low. Almost a whisper. You don't know what you're looking for. Claire froze. I'm sorry. Who is this? You need to stop. It isn't yours to uncover. The call ended. Claire sat in silence, the phone still to her ear. No one knew. No one could have known. Unless someone was watching. And that's when it hit her. The drawer wasn't locked to keep others out. It was locked because something inside it knew how to scream. The next morning, Claire walked into the office like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't trespassed into a space not meant for her. Like she hadn't received a call that made the blood in her veins run cold. Like she wasn't unraveling at the edges, thread by cautious thread. But inside, something had shifted. The call, short, anonymous, and impossibly timed, wasn't just a warning. It was proof. Proof that whatever Matthew Ryland was keeping locked away wasn't just sensitive. It was dangerous. She spent the morning glued to routine, phone calls, calendar updates, email summaries. But her fingers typed slower, her mind parsing every sentence twice. At 11:07 a.m., Matthew stepped out for a meeting, off-site. She watched him enter the elevator, flashing his usual kind smile to a junior associate, and disappear behind closing doors. Her hands didn't shake as they moved. She crossed the office once more, this time not for answers, but for confirmation. Inside his office, she moved swiftly. She didn't touch the drawer again. It was futile without access. But her attention drifted to his credenza. Claire had seen him take papers from there before. Casual things, meeting notes, draft contracts, financial briefs, nothing classified. But this time, she opened the second cabinet on the left and saw a thick folder marked Confidential, Halberton Holdings, Retention Agreement. Odd. She'd just finished preparing the final draft of that agreement 3 days ago. It wasn't due for review until next week. She opened it. It was empty. Every page had been removed, but the folder hadn't been refiled or destroyed. It was just sitting there, waiting to be found. Claire stood frozen. Either someone had removed the contents recently, or the folder had been planted, left behind like a trail of breadcrumbs. The problem was, she couldn't tell if the path was leading to the truth, or away from it. Just then, her phone vibrated. It was a message. Blocked ID. No text. Just a photo. She opened it slowly. It was an image of her, taken from outside the building, through the glass walls of the 41st floor. Her back was turned, standing exactly where she was now. The timestamp. 2 minutes ago. Claire backed away from the window instinctively, heart slamming against her ribs. Someone was watching. She locked the cabinet, returned everything to its place, and exited Matthew's office as calmly as she could, trying not to sprint back to her desk. Every instinct told her to go home, to erase everything, to pretend none of this ever happened. But she didn't. Instead, she opened a blank document and began typing her own notes. A timeline, a pattern, the first RITEC request, the missing contract, the CP entry, the voice on the phone, the photo, the file that was supposed to be there, and wasn't. And as she typed, her thoughts grew louder. What if Matthew wasn't the one hiding something? What if he was the one being watched? The possibility chilled her more than anything. That night, Claire didn't go home. She went to a hotel 2 blocks away, paying in cash, using a name she hadn't used in years. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about business. It was about something far older, far more dangerous than a corporate secret. Something someone was willing to protect at any cost, even if that meant making Claire disappear. The hotel room was modest, beige walls, dim lighting, and the faint hum of the air conditioner. Nothing luxurious, nothing traceable. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, eyes wide open, sleep a distant memory. She kept the curtains drawn, and her phone on airplane mode. Her laptop was closed, powered down, battery removed. Paranoia? Maybe. But it wasn't paranoia if someone had actually taken her picture, if someone had called her, if someone knew, and if she was right. If Matthew Ryland was involved in something darker than anyone suspected, she needed more than suspicions. She needed proof. The next day, she returned to work like clockwork. Tailored dress, quiet demeanor, calm face. Only her eyes betrayed her. They moved faster now, scanning for signs of surveillance. But everything seemed normal. Too normal. Matthew wasn't in yet. That was unusual. He never missed morning calls unless something serious had come up. At 9:14 a.m., his assistant from legal stopped by her desk with a manila envelope. "Mr. Ryland asked me to deliver this to you," she said distractedly. "Said it was personal." Claire thanked her and waited until the woman walked away before opening it. Inside were 2 things: a keycard marked Level C, Private Access. A note in Matthew's handwriting. "Midnight. No one else. You'll understand everything." Claire stared at the note, her breath caught between trust and fear. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a request. It was a plea. She tucked the keycard into her purse and folded the note carefully. Then she returned to her work. The rest of the day passed like molasses. Slow, heavy, surreal. Matthew never returned. No emails, no calls. But just before 5 p.m., as most of the office packed up, Claire overheard something by the elevators. "Did you hear who came by last week?" That woman from Silvergate. Wait, Caroline Pierce? I thought she disappeared. No, she showed up. Looked like hell. Said she needed to speak with Rylan privately. Claire froze. Caroline Pierce. CP. The initials from the calendar. The off-site meetings. The hidden contract. The sealed drawer. It all came together in a rush so overwhelming it made her dizzy. Caroline Pierce wasn't just a name from the past. She had once been a rising star in Halberton's legal department. Talented, ambitious, and then gone. Rumors flew. Burnout, breakdown, blackmail. No one knew what had happened. Just that one day she vanished. And now she was back. Meeting with Matthew. In secret. Twice. Claire stayed late at the office, pretending to be buried in work. At 11:43 p.m., with the building nearly empty, she made her way to the service elevator. The keycard panel waited, glowing silently. She slid the card in. A soft beep. The doors opened. Level C, private access. The elevator descended lower than she'd ever been. The air changed. Cooler. Heavier. When the doors opened, Claire found herself in a part of the building she didn't know existed. Dim lighting. Concrete walls. No reception. Just a narrow hallway leading to a door marked simply, Archives. The moment she stepped inside, the door clicked shut behind her. The room was larger than expected. Rows of locked cabinets, shelves of paper records, and one desk in the far corner. A figure stood behind it. Matthew. He looked different. Tired. Haunted. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said quietly. I almost didn't, Claire replied. He nodded once, as if accepting that. And then, he whispered, It's about Caroline. Claire's pulse quickened. She uncovered something years ago, he said, about an acquisition Halberton was part of. Something that wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. She tried to expose it. Someone stopped her, not me, but I was told to keep her silent. And you did? Claire asked. No, he said. I protected her, at a cost, but now she's back, and someone knows. Someone powerful. They think I'm the one who leaked it. Claire stepped closer. What was it, Matthew? He looked her in the eye. It was a cover-up, Claire. A death. Buried under forged contracts and manipulated audits. I didn't commit it, but I signed papers that made it disappear. The room seemed to spin around her. Why tell me now? She whispered. Because Caroline's missing again, he said. And this time, I don't think she ran. Claire didn't remember leaving the building. Her mind barely registered the hum of the elevator as it carried her back up from the depths of Halberton's hidden archive level, nor the way the city lights blurred outside the glass as she stepped out onto the street. Her heart, however, was pounding loud and clear, like a warning drum echoing through her chest. Caroline Pierce was missing, again, and this time, Matthew wasn't hiding from the truth. He was reaching for help. Claire returned to the hotel, locked the door, and sat in silence for almost an hour, replaying every detail of the conversation underground. A death, a cover-up, forged documents, and Matthew's haunted eyes when he said, I signed papers that made it disappear. Was that guilt in his voice, regret, or self-preservation? Claire wasn't sure, but something told her he wasn't lying, not this time. She opened her laptop, took it off airplane mode, and checked for updates. Nothing from Matthew. No news on Caroline. She searched her name, hoping for any sign of life. Nothing. No social media, no police reports, no press releases. Caroline had vanished completely. At 2:41 a.m., Claire's phone rang. Unlisted number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? A pause. Then, a voice she recognized instantly. Caroline Pierce. Claire? She said, her voice frayed and low. "I don't have long." Claire sat upright, heart pounding. "Caroline, are you safe? Where are you?" "I can't say. They're watching everything. Phones, emails, every signal." "Why call me then?" "Because you're the only one who doesn't owe them anything," she said. "And because Matthew still thinks he can fix this without consequences. But he can't. It's too deep. Too many people are involved." Claire swallowed hard. "What happened to you? What did you find?" Caroline's breath crackled through the line. "It wasn't just a cover-up. The man who died, it wasn't an accident. It was retaliation. A message." Claire froze. "A message to who?" "To me. I was the one digging, and they knew." Claire stood, pacing the hotel room. "Why come back now?" "Because I thought I could finally expose them. But I was wrong. They're still here, Claire. Inside Halberton. And they're watching Matthew like a hawk. The moment he steps out of line, they'll ruin him. Or worse. Then what do we do?" There was silence. Then Caroline said slowly, "There's a document, one I saved. The original audit trail. I hid it, off-site. The only proof left. If it disappears, so do I." "Where is it?" Another pause. Then, "I'll send you coordinates, not over the phone. Wait for a courier. No names, no notes. Just follow the envelope." Claire's mouth was dry. "Caroline, are you okay?" But the line was already dead. Claire stood still in the darkness, phone pressed to her ear. A document. A death. A billionaire CEO trapped in the middle of a machine he may have once helped build. And now, Claire was no longer just a secretary. She was a thread being pulled through something vast, sharp, and dangerous. She had asked for the truth. And now, the truth was asking her to act. The courier arrived just after noon. A teenager on a bike, no uniform, no badge. He handed Claire a plain, unmarked envelope and said only one word. "From her." Then he rode off without waiting for a response. Claire locked herself in a supply room on a lower floor of the building, her hands trembling as she opened the envelope. Inside, there was no letter, no instructions, just a small USB drive wrapped in brown paper, and a hand-drawn map with coordinates marked in red ink. A warehouse. On the outskirts of the city, near the old shipping docks. Claire took a deep breath. She could turn it all over now, bring the USB to authorities, to the press, to the board of Halberton. But she didn't know what was on it yet, and she didn't know if she could trust anyone but herself, so she made a choice. That evening, just before dusk, she drove to the address alone. The warehouse was derelict, windows boarded, the outside overgrown with weeds. But the door opened with a push. Inside, the air smelled of rust and old water. Claire followed the map exactly. 8 steps to the right, then toward a rusted metal cabinet tucked in the shadows. Her fingers fumbled with the handle. Inside, beneath a false floor panel, she found a locked tin box, and taped to the bottom of the lid, a key. Inside the box was everything Caroline had promised, and more. Original audit documents, wire transfer records, a series of emails from executives Claire recognized, names tied to Halberton, to its parent company, even to members of government. Some of the correspondence mentioned Matthew. But here's what made Claire's breath catch. He wasn't the instigator. He was the scapegoat. Years ago, Matthew had discovered irregularities in a merger Halberton was facilitating. When he tried to back out, they threatened him, professionally and personally. His signature had been forged on some of the worst documents. Others he'd signed under duress, believing he could manage the damage from inside. He had taken the fall to protect someone. Claire suddenly understood why he had kept the folder hidden, why the drawer was locked, why he had told her, "You'll understand everything." He wasn't hiding his guilt. He was shielding others from a truth too dangerous to expose. And now, Claire had the power to do what he never could. But the cost would be monumental. If she exposed the files, the fallout would be massive. Halberton would collapse. Thousands would lose their jobs. Matthew would be implicated, even if his role was far more complex than villainy. Caroline might be hunted again. And Claire, she might never live a normal life. If she destroyed the evidence, everything continued. Halberton would thrive. Matthew would remain a respected figure. No one would ever know what he had endured in silence. 2 futures. One in her left hand, one in her right. When she returned to her apartment at dawn, she had already made her choice. 3 weeks later, Halberton and Coer issued a press release. Effective immediately, Matthew Ryland has resigned from his position as CEO. He will remain on the board in an advisory capacity. We thank him for his years of service and integrity. No explanation followed. No scandal. No leaks. Inside her drawer, Claire kept the USB in a locked case under her personal journal. The documents had not been destroyed, but they had not yet been released. She had given Matthew a path to step down quietly, to walk away before someone forced him out, before the wolves circled again. He took it. Whether he knew why the ground had suddenly gone still beneath his feet, Claire wasn't sure. But she watched him walk out of the building with something that had been missing for a long time. Peace. Caroline disappeared once more. This time, voluntarily. Somewhere safe. Claire never heard from her again. As for herself, Claire remained at Halberton. Not as a secretary, but as something far more dangerous. Someone who knew the truth. Someone who had the power to bring down giants. Someone with silence in her hands, and the wisdom to wait. Because sometimes, justice isn't loud. Sometimes, it whispers. And sometimes, the kindest woman in the room is also the one holding the trigger. 13 months later, Claire stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, her fingers wrapped around a porcelain coffee mug, watching the city below flicker to life in the early morning haze. She had never liked heights. But lately, she found peace in places where the noise was far away. Halberton and Comern had changed in the last year. New leadership, new culture. Fewer secrets, or at least fewer that she wasn't already aware of. Matthew Ryland had vanished from the public eye. No interviews, no speaking engagements. A quiet life somewhere in Maine, she'd heard. Fishing, writing, healing. Claire hadn't spoken to him since his resignation. He'd left her a handwritten note, sealed and simple. Thank you for seeing the man behind the myth, and not burning us both down. You gave me a second ending. I hope you give yourself one too. She still hadn't opened the case with the USB drive since the day she locked it away. It sat beneath the floorboards in her apartment, untouched but never forgotten. The truth was still in her hands. Caroline's name appeared once in a whistleblower report that was quickly dismissed. Claire suspected it was intentional, a breadcrumb, a test. She left it alone. Some truths, she'd learned, are only useful when people are ready to believe them. And the world wasn't ready yet. She took a sip of her coffee and closed her eyes. She was no longer the invisible secretary in the background of powerful lives. She now led compliance for Halberton's internal investigations, a quiet position with sharp edges. People listened when she spoke. They watched what they said around her. She had become the thing she once admired from afar, decisive, aware, unshakably calm. But she had also become something else. Dangerous, because she still had the proof, because she still remembered everything, and because she still believed justice might one day demand its voice. Just not today. She placed her mug on the ledge, turned toward the elevator, and walked back inside. The city kept moving, but this time, she was moving with it, not hiding from it. The silence inside her was no longer fear. It was power. If you've made it this far, Leave a comment sharing what you thought about the story and give it a rating from 0 to 10. Thank you so much.